Hello, this is David. Welcome to episode 1 of Because You Asked, which is a series of videos in which I will answer any questions, whether it's music related, life related. It doesn't really matter. If you want to know, I might have the answers. And this is a little different than any Q&As we've done before because we will see you on the screen. The questions are submitted via video on my community app. It's my backstage. If you don't know the backstage, well, stick till the end if you want to ask a question. I'll tell you more about it. But I asked some of the members of my backstage what they wanted to know. So without further ado, here's question 1. Our first question is by Scat, and I'm going to go by usernames. Whatever you enter in the app, that's what I'll call you. Okay, Scat, here's your question.
Hey, David, I got 2 questions. You can pick which one you want to use. One is, I could use some tips and suggestions on playing lead and rhythm together. And I'd also love some suggestions on making chord progressions using the modes and stuff. All right, thanks, man.
Well, those are loaded questions, and we have a limited time, but those are great questions. Let me grab my guitar. So your first question has to do with mixing leads and rhythm. The first thing is the tone. Have a tone, in my opinion, that is not too clean, not too dirty, but that it would work in both kind of things. So a little bit of crunch. Something that cleans up when you play soft, and that kind of has a little bit of dirt when you don't. You want a lot of expression in there. Think Hendrix, Little Wing, where the tone works on so many different things. What I would start doing is playing with some form of E and some form of A, those 2 chords. So here's an E and an A because of the open strings. And then start exploring. So if we're in E, maybe I'll start with my E and then kind of a because you can always have that bass. And then E. Because you always have this constant bass that resonates, the transition is not as abrupt, you know, if you're playing abrupt being something like whereas there's really a distinction there between rhythm and lead. Start exploring with that kind of thing. Okay, this is not very conventional advice, but don't use a metronome for this. Later on, yes. But if you add a metronome to this, it's gonna add a pretty heavy-duty limitation that you're gonna have to stick with, and that's gonna take maybe 75% of your concentration power to try to match the metronome. You're gonna focus too much on the rhythm, on the metronome, and not be able to be very creative. So I would really use open chords and try to come up with cool stuff, maybe build things around your chord by adding some notes that are within reach. Instead of, you know, transitioning from this. There's a big jump. Don't do that. Try to find the neighbor notes. Let's enter the second one.
And I'd also love some suggestions on making chord progressions using the modes and stuff.
This one is a fairly easy answer, and it's really fun to do. You pick a mode, anything, and then on a diagram, a fret, like whether you print an empty fretboard diagram or you use a software, an app, or whatever it is, you map out your full mode on the diagram. So let's take Lydian, for example, and you're working in E Lydian. So you map it out all over the fretboard, and then you randomly select some notes that you're seeing on the screen. Those are gonna be your chords. And so instead of thinking in terms of traditional chords, maybe thinking of scale degrees, like 2, 5, 1, whatever it is, you're not doing that. You're taking a different approach. You're looking at the full fretboard, and you're extracting from it different notes that seem kind of cool. So if you're in A Lydian, maybe you could do, that's cool. Is that an A Lydian chord? Is it extracted from A Lydian? Absolutely. What's the name of it? Doesn't really matter at this point. You're just kind of highlighting some notes there. And this can get into the blending the rhythm and the lead. And so forth. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Our next question comes from Pete.
David, Pete Franz calling in. I would really appreciate a lesson surrounding the playing of Tuck Andrus and the late great Michael Hedges, of chord melody lead and combination playing, such as they demonstrate on their albums so successfully. Thanks very much for the channel. We enjoy Backstage very much, and have a great weekend.
I'm gonna disappoint here. I'm not really the guy to ask this because my finger picking is not great. My only thought on this is to separate the movements first. Think of the bass and then add the melody. That's what I would do if I really wanted to get into that style, but I'm so sorry. I wish I could do more. Separate the voices though. I think that'll help. Next question.
Hi David, I'd like some tips on how to correct bad habits with my picking technique to improve I have a tendency to push the beat, and I'd like to know how to fix that since I've got 30 plus years of playing guitar and making that habit worse. Any ideas?
I have a few ideas. So a couple things. You mentioned picking technique, which could be a position thing, but you also mentioned pushing the beat. So I don't know if it means speeding up in accordance to the metronome or slowing down. I think speeding up, but here's my suggestion. This is what helped me. You take a simple thing, we'll just do a chromatic thing. Not exactly chromatic, but 5, 6, 7, 8 across all the strings. And the idea is you will place your fingers, so index, and then middle, but keep the index on there. Ring, pinky, and then we're moving on to the next string, but don't move any unnecessary fingers. So everything stays on the fretboard until it's time for it to move. So now the index is gonna move, but these 3 fingers stay there. So what does this do? It creates, first of all, finger independence, which is not necessarily what you're struggling with, but it's always a good thing. But it also forces you to stay as close as possible to the fretboard. Well, that's kind of weird. It's a very difficult exercise for me. It's got to be performed very slowly. So use a metronome. So yeah, I can't even do it. But use a metronome. And although the exercise is boring and slow, it really forces your fingers to think independently from each other and get super comfortable with the technique. And it also forces you, in order to play the exercise correctly, to synchronize your right hand and your left hand. So try it. Don't overdo it because you could hurt yourself, but I'd say maybe 3 minutes before you start playing. Try that exercise. You don't have to do it with 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do it with anything, but just really force your fingers to stay on the fretboard as long as possible until they have to make a move. And then start anticipating that move. Try to think, okay, my ring finger is gonna have to move here. Just the ring finger, imagine what it feels like. A lot of it is mental, but that's real. I think it will really help your connection with the instrument. I hope it helps, but man, we're in the same boat. I'm not the expert. You probably are. You probably know a lot of what you need to do already, but I hope this puts you on the right path. Thanks so much for asking a question. This one is from Woodward.
As a father of 3 boys, I'm hoping to get my kids interested in playing music, any instrument, at some point in their life. They're all under the age of 10. I was hoping if you had any pointers or tips to help maybe inspire, fathers or parents to get their kids interested in music.
I don't quite have the answer, and I'm not an expert. I do have 2 kids. You have 3, so you may be more experienced than I am in that realm. I would love my kids to share that passion with me. My daughter's 6, my son is 5. I've never really forced it on them. You don't seem like the guy who's forcing it on them at all. I'm not saying that, but that's number 1. And number 2, I think, and it depends on the kids, at a certain age, if your kids see that you're so passionate about something, they're gonna wanna try it because they're gonna see the joy on your face. So I have a couple guitars home that I will play every once in a while. I try to expose them to music I like. I just listen to the music I like in the car. Like there's a lot of Satriani. My kids love Vi, so that's great because they just hear it. But I think just keep it fun. Don't force it. The thing with guitar with kids is that you need a small guitar to fit their hands. I think it's hard to find an instrument that is pleasant to play, that doesn't hurt, that is set up correctly for smaller hands. So that's been a challenge for me. Next up, we have Henry.
Hi David, I recently learned to solo using the pentatonic scales, but my solos, even though they sound pretty good, but they always sound really bluesy. So I was wondering if you could have any tips to make them sound more rocky. That's it. Also, when I try to use diatonic scales, it always sounds sad, so and minor. So I was wondering if you could have any tips for that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can totally relate. That was me for a long time. And pentatonic sounded fine, but I did want something extra. I didn't quite know what. And I did look at diatonic scales. And when I used them, yeah, they sounded kind of sad, but they sounded robotic and not very comfortable. A couple things. First of all, when you say they sound sad, I wonder if maybe you're using the wrong diatonic scale. Use Dorian. When I was learning how to play, it was in the 90s, and I had heard of non-pentatonic scales, and I thought minor, yeah, that's great. Because major was too happy. And so I thought minor, well, that's the one, Aeolian, the minor scale. That sounded too sad, it just didn't work. Well, I realized later on that Dorian is really the minor scale that most of the bands I loved, the rock bands, used. So that's number one. Try Dorian. To make it sound more rocky, maybe try to learn a few sequences. So let me show you real quick. All right, so I'll switch to a lead tone here, and let's say that we are in A minor pentatonic. So you've got your penta, sounds kind of blues, and you want to add something. So add Dorian. 3-note per strings would be something like this: 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9. And a sequence would be something maybe like this, where you're playing 6 notes, and then 6 notes again from the 5th, and the 4th, something like that. And try to incorporate stuff like that with your pentatonic scale. Don't forget about the blues stuff, because that's the essence of rock, but try to blend it. Stuff like that, that's kind of the idea. And then the next step is using your pentatonic box, but instead of using the 3-note per string, which can be a little bit limiting with all this sequence, this you can only go so far. It doesn't really speak much. See the pentatonic scale see modes as the pentatonic scale plus 2 notes. So Dorian would be plus the 2nd and the 6th. And so you phrase with minor pentatonic scale. So all your licks are going to remain the same, but every once in a while, you will land on one of those 2 additional notes. That'll open up, I think, new ideas for you. But Henry, keep it fun. Don't get discouraged. You've got your lifetime. I do too. We all do. And it's a journey and it's a fun one. So keep up the good work. This next question is from Andy.
I thought a question I could ask would be, in your experience as a long-time player as well, discussing the flying pinky on the fretboard, and maybe just not the pinky, but the other fingers as well. How to develop more control, not so much control, but stay closer to the fretboard. In saying that, I've seen a lot of really good players that seem to manage to have finger gymnastics going on all the time. But I notice in my own playing, I'll just give you a quick example, things like this riff I was messing about with the other day. I just realized how much my pinky how to control that. But not just that, in blues, things like so you see how much the pinky moves. Even but then it's really strange how it stays close when it's there, but yet when you go, it's all over the place. Maybe everybody does it. I'm sure I remember a guy called Danny something, who was like I think he was a student of Joe Satriani, and his ability to stay close to the fretboard was incredible. Yeah, so finger gymnastics and flying pinkies. That would be a good title for a video. Cheers, man.
Yeah, Andy, so I don't know. Next question. No, I'm kidding. I get it. I get what you're saying. Okay, first of all, I think to fix it-ish, that first exercise that I shared, where you're lifting your finger at the latest time possible, that helps. I've struggled with that for a long time, and I've seen many, many players trying to solve it. And I kind of came to the realization, why? Is it really that important? Because in the end, it sounds the same, whether your pinky's all up there or not. Aesthetically, maybe it doesn't look as good, but who cares, right? I get that maybe it's a speed thing because, if you think about it, the closer you are, the faster it'll be to reach that place. But I wonder if it's true. I always thought it was. The smallest distance is very fast to go, whereas here it's not as fast, but you also have momentum. So if you're really close and this is not comfortable for your pinky to stay there, you are using some strength to be close to the fret, right? So some kind of like muscle or tendons or whatever it is. And it doesn't feel comfortable for us. That's why we all have our pinky far off. And so maybe it requires more effort to travel this distance when the pinky is close to the string because it's a natural instead of being here where you have more momentum. I just wonder if it's really that big of a deal. But thank you so much for asking the question, and we all struggle with it for sure. Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate you.
I was wondering if reading music would help me improve my playing much as far as filling in gaps. I've been playing for about 46 years and I'm just not pleased with my playing. I don't feel I'm up to par, especially for the number of years I've been playing. And I just wanted to get your opinion on learning to read music. Thank you.
Good question. Very good question. My first thought is, because you asked, do you think if learning how to read music will make me sound better? That's kind of what I understood. I'll say the answer is no. It's not going to help you sound better. It definitely has its advantages, but if you're looking at acquiring that big skill, which is reading music, and your goal is to sound better and play better, I think there's faster ways to get there than reading music. What I would recommend, and you probably tried that, but it's so simple yet so beneficial, is to literally put the guitar down and spend a lot of time listening to what you want it to sound like, what an idea wants to sound like. Just put a backing track on, sing over it, and then replicate what you sing. I say it all the time, but that's really the best and fastest way to sound better, I think. Reading does have its advantages. It clarifies your ideas in your mind. It helps you understand more how rhythm placement works, how intervals are laid out on the fretboard. Plus, there is this massive library of ideas that were never tabbed that you can dig into, especially for non-guitar instruments like violin music or trumpet, or monophonic instruments are great to learn new lines on the guitar. So few guitar players can read these days, and me included. I know how it works, but I don't sight read very fast. Thanks a lot for asking this, Dusty. Okay, we have one more question, and this one is from Strange Device. Now, before we hear his question, you might be wondering how you can ask your questions just like that and be featured in a future episode. Well, you can join the Backstage, which is an online community of guitar players. I made it completely free, and there's different musical challenges in there, and that is where you can submit your video questions for the next episode. I'm gonna try to do one a month. Just sign up, it's completely free. The link is below, and for now, let's listen to the last question, which is from Strange Device.
Hey David, this is Sunny. My question is, if you had to choose another instrument that's not guitar to be your main instrument, what would it be?
Saxophone, because of this. I really would love to play this song, I'm serious, on the sax, on top of a cliff with a waterfall and the sunset. I'm serious. I'd love to do that. Yeah, good question, Sonny. Thanks so much for all your questions, everyone. For those of you who want their questions answered on the next episode, it's right here. Just request a free invite and I'll approve it. This is the Backstage free community, and you can ask your video questions right there. I'll see you in the Backstage.